when gas is not gas. Uh, as a surgeon, we routinely see in our OPD patients coming to us with complaint of gas. So let's understand here with a surgeon's perspective. I am happy to hear with Dr. Sonali Bhagwat, who is a senior consultant surgeon in laparoscopic general and breast surgery. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Ajit.
Yeah. So as surgeons, we hear, I have gas almost every day in our OPD. So how seriously should we take it?
Yep, that's a very common problem. It's very common to have patients coming to us complaining of gas. And this could be anything ranging from upper digestive discomfort to mild bloating, to cramping, to burning in the chest, to difficulty in digesting food after meals. So many things. They all come under the umbrella of gas. It's a common symptom and we should take it seriously when the patient comes to us, mostly because some gas perhaps is so-called normal, can be treated very simply, but some is not. And as surgeons, we should be very aware that gas is a symptom, not a disease, and every symptom brought to us by a patient should be taken seriously.
Which are the common causes of gas you routinely see in your surgical practice?
So the common causes of gas, so-called gas, or upper digestive discomfort or dyspepsia, only about 10 or 20% of these are actually due to surgical causes. The rest are mostly due to medical causes, and even out of these, some of them don't have a cause at all. That is a condition we call functional dyspepsia. But of the surgical causes, the commonest ones that we see in our practice are gallstones, gastroesophageal reflux due to hiatus hernia, then conditions like diverticular disease, unexplained abdominal symptoms due to small bowel or colonic pathologies, pancreatitis, sometimes even small hernias. Sometimes some cancers may present like this. And then we have some other rarer causes like small bowel obstruction or decreased blood supply to the bowel. But all these can present with upper or central abdominal discomfort, which may be misinterpreted by the patient as gas.
How do you approach a patient with complaining of gas?
That's a very good question, and it really brings us back to the foundation of a medical education, which basically says that you must approach the patient as a whole and you must listen to the patient. So this is a classic example. Gas as a symptom can be due, the organ of origin could be anywhere in the abdomen. Sometimes it is even outside the abdomen. So in this case, we really have to be very careful to listen to what the patient is saying. So I'll give you an example. Supposing a patient comes and says, I have gas, and then we listen and we ask questions and we learn that the patient actually is complaining of discomfort after meals, or he is unable to tolerate oily and spicy food, or perhaps the pain is more in the center of the abdomen or on the right side, and sometimes the pain might be sharp shooting. All these things will point towards a possible diagnosis of gallstones, and they will prompt us to ask for the tests that will confirm or rule out this diagnosis. Equally important is a physical examination whereby we palpate the abdomen and we look for signs like a lump, or we examine the patient to see if there is evidence of jaundice, if there is evidence of weight loss. All these things are clues, and we use all these clues put together to give us some sort of rough idea of what we might be considering, and then accordingly we order tests to confirm or rule out our differential diagnosis.
What are the clinical cues that suggest that the gas is not functional?
Yeah, so the clinical signs that would lead us to think that definitely this symptom, so-called of gas, is due to some pathology rather than just functional, would be if the symptom is recurrent. That means if it is happening over a long period of time, if it is happening over some months or some weeks, if it is not treatable with ordinary over-the-counter medications. Many a times patients will try over-the-counter medications. They might try things like Hajmola, Pudin Hara, even medicines for acidity. They will try these kind of medicines, and if the symptoms don't settle down, then definitely it should be looked into. That's one. Also, the complaint of gas that happens after a new complaint that happens after the age of 50, definitely we should look at. If the symptom of gas is associated with other symptoms like vomiting, like bowel upset, like weight loss, like retrosternal burning, that is pain in the chest, or if it is associated with meal times. These are all things that should lead us, or if there is jaundice, for example, or weight loss. These are all things that should tell us that this symptom should not be dismissed as something functional, but we should definitely look into it. So it's a bit of detective work. A good examination of the patient combined with this sort of flowchart in your head should point you towards the next steps.
So which tests help in diagnosis?
So again, from a surgical perspective, it's very important to find that 10 or 20% of gas that is due to a surgical cause, a surgically treatable cause. So our investigations will largely be directed towards ruling out these conditions. And of course, after a good history and examination, we would start with basic investigations like blood tests. So things like a complete blood count, a liver function test, pancreatic enzymes, a urine examination and a stool examination. These things can point us in a particular direction. Another very useful investigation is an ultrasound of the abdomen and pelvis, which gives us so much information. For example, it is the best investigation to diagnose gallstones, and we can also pick up things like small tumors and other such things. Another good investigation is a CT scan, which gives us more details about the bowel. So we can pick up things like diverticular disease or small hernias using a CT scan. And after that, if we feel so, we may perform gastrointestinal endoscopies, which is basically an upper GI scopy or a gastroscopy or a colonoscopy from below. So for the common complaint of gas, these are mostly upper abdominal symptoms, and many of these patients would go for a gastroscopy. And a gastroscopy is a very important investigation in this case because it would tell us whether the patient has gastroesophageal reflux, whether they have a hiatus hernia, whether they have any ulcers, whether they have any inflammation. And increasingly nowadays, we are finding that they have a bacterial infection due to a bacteria called Helicobacter pylori, which is diagnosed on gastroscopy. And if we find it, the treatment is just 2 weeks plus 4 weeks of medicine. So it's very important to do the right investigations. After endoscopies, if we're still not finding anything, as a last resort, sometimes we can perform a diagnostic laparoscopy, which is a surgical procedure using a laparoscopic camera through the umbilicus under general anesthesia. And we have often found some interesting surgical surprises this way. For example, unexplained abdominal pain for years, and we have diagnosed things like a twist in the bowel which comes and goes, or intermittent obstruction caused by bands, or very small tumors that go in and out of the bowel telescopically. And all these conditions can be diagnosed sometimes only at diagnostic laparoscopy. So we start with non-invasive investigations and we go to more invasive investigations. And with all these, we are usually able to find a cause of gas that is surgically treatable. And once we rule out surgically treatable causes, and we know that there is nothing that requires a surgery, usually then we will involve our colleagues from gastrointestinal medicine who have a whole set of tests of their own. And they will test for things like food intolerances, they will test for things like inflammatory bowel disease, and for other various causes of dyspepsia.
So very often we get referred patients with an ultrasound showing a gallstones. So how to proceed with that?
This is a very common situation in clinical practice because as surgeons, it's very common for us to get patients coming to us with ultrasound scans that have been done either as part of a routine health checkup, or the patients have gone to their local general practitioner for some unexplained abdominal pain and gas symptoms, or the patients have just gone and done it themselves and they have a finding of gallstones or stones in the gallbladder. And then they don't know what to do and very often these patients get referred to us, and all of them think that they require surgery, but actually in many cases they don't, and that is a call which really should be taken by the surgeon. So to give you an idea, many times many patients have incidental findings of gallstones on an ultrasound scan, and if they are in generally good health and we find they've got one single stone which is not blocking anything and not causing any inflammation or any swelling of the gallbladder, such patients can be observed. That means that they can repeat their ultrasound scan once every year as part of a health checkup if they remain asymptomatic. And if they get any symptoms at all, like increase in like any dyspepsia, any indigestion, any pain on the right side, well, yes, they should come to their doctor, and that's the time when they might require removal of the gallbladder. There's another situation where the ultrasound scans might show multiple small stones. But again, if the gallbladder wall is not inflamed and if there are no other signs of infection or inflammation and the patient is not diabetic, then again, these kind of people can be observed, but we would have a higher threshold of operating them as soon as they got symptomatic, because we are a little concerned about the possibility of one of these stones coming out of the gallbladder and slipping into the bile duct, and that usually then would require some intervention. In a diabetic, we would also have a slightly lower threshold for surgery because we know are a little more prone to infections and inflammations when they have gallstones already. But however, if the patients are symptomatic, that means if they have upper abdominal symptoms, discomfort, especially after meals, intolerance to oily or spicy food, sometimes pain in the epigastrium or on the right side, or if they've had any jaundice or any severe pain and they have an ultrasound showing gallstones, especially multiple gallstones with some evidence of inflammation, then yes, we would call those pathological gallbladders or symptomatic gallbladders. And in this case, because the gallbladder is no longer functioning properly, then these patients need to undergo surgery, which nowadays, of course, we all do minimally invasive surgery. There is another entity which is not very common, which is called acalculous cholecystitis, which basically means that the gallbladder is diseased, but it doesn't have stones. This is not a very common condition, but I think it's important to mention because one should be aware of it. It is actually due to an impairment of the movement of the gallbladder. The gallbladder normally has a function that it stores extra bile that is made in the liver, and after a meal, the gallbladder contracts to release this bile. So sometimes there is a problem in this movement of the gallbladder, and that causes a situation called gallbladder dyskinesia, where the patient will get bloating, dyspepsia, or even pain, but there is no stone. And this condition, the reason I'm mentioning it is because this condition is often only diagnosed by a special test called a HIDA scan, which is not common. But if we do diagnose gallbladder dyskinesia and the gallbladder does not have any stones, then sometimes, even in these cases, surgical removal of the gallbladder will give them relief.
Suppose we have find a surgically treatable cause. What are the surgical options?
So, as I earlier mentioned, only about 10 to 20% of patients with gas as a symptom have surgically treatable causes, but the ones who do all require surgery. And nowadays we do all these surgeries by minimally invasive methods. So it's either laparoscopic surgery or robotic surgery, what is commonly known as Durbin ki surgery or keyhole surgery or Bina Take ka operation. This is the common usage for these surgeries. They're all done using very small cuts in the abdomen through which we insert instruments that are very thin, as thin sometimes as 3 millimeters, 5 millimeters, or in the case of robotic surgery, 8 millimeters. And we insert we insert our telescopic instruments through these small holes. There is a camera attached, and we do these surgeries by looking at a monitor. Laparoscopic, of course, came earlier, and now since the late 90s or so, we have robotic surgeries, which are even better. But the common thing with both laparoscopic and robotic surgeries is that they are very kind to the patient. The trauma to the patient's tissues, the handling of the patient's tissues is kept at a minimum. And they do really very well. They have less pain when they wake up. They have a much quicker post-operative recovery, and they return to their normal lives much faster. So yes, nearly pretty much all the surgeries that we used to do with big incisions and open surgery, now we do them through minimally invasive methods, and we can treat all the surgically treatable causes of gas this way.
So what about robotic surgeries? Is the robot doing them?
Now, there's a common misconception. No, the robot is not doing them, we are doing them. But we are doing them sitting on a console and controlling the robot. So we sit on a console, very much like how you would sit on a video gaming console, and we control robotic instruments that are on the patient. So the robotic instruments the robot is docked on the patient. There are 3 or 4 robotic arms that carry telescopic instruments that are inserted into the patient's abdomen. But the movement of those arms is controlled by the surgeon sitting on the console with his fingers in grips that with small movements we can cause movements of the telescopic instrument at the patient end. And the beauty of this is the instruments are wristed. So when you move your fingers this way, the same movements are translated to the robotic instruments, giving rise to the same delicate, rotational movements that we would use in very precise surgery. So robotic surgery is fantastic really, because it's very precise, it's very dexterous. As I said earlier, the movements very much mimic your natural movements of the hands. It offers you 360 degrees of rotation, 7 degrees of freedom. And as a result, you're really only tackling the pathology and nothing else. So again, these patients do really very well. They're very precise surgeries. The comfort is immense. We are sitting on a console. Ergonomically and from a practical and technical standpoint, they are really very comfortable. And we can do any surgery that we can do laparoscopically, we can achieve robotically with definitely superior outcomes and much more comfort for the patient.
Take-home message to our listeners.
Yes, there are a couple of important take-home messages when we are dealing with gas, so-called. Firstly, some gas may be normal. For example, if one has gone to a party the previous night and overindulged, and the next morning one has a little bit of digestive discomfort, and you keep your diet light that day, take a little rest, perhaps maybe, just take medicine for acidity or a probiotic, and the symptom goes away within a day, then that sort of gas would not be worrisome. However, if one has symptoms that are over a long time or not responding to medication, or as earlier mentioned, associated with other things like vomiting or jaundice or bowel upset or weight loss, these kind of things must be brought to your doctor. They must be brought to your doctor. You should never self-treat this. That's the first thing. The second thing is that nowadays everybody has access to information. And I think that we should appreciate that it is better to investigate and to make a diagnosis, make a specific diagnosis which one can treat, and go ahead and treat it in a stepwise manner, rather than visiting your local doctor for years on end and popping the same pills without getting any good result. I mean, at best it's a waste of your time, and at worst you might be missing something very serious like a cancer. So it's okay to go ahead and have tests, because the tests will basically give you peace of mind. They will give you a specific diagnosis. And the other thing I wanted to say was that yes, although not all gas has a surgical cause, it's important to find the ones that have a surgical cause, and if you do, it's no problem. The surgeries for them are very straightforward, and they can be done by minimally invasive techniques which are very comfortable for the patient and have excellent outcomes, whether you're very young or very old, and they're all quite safe. So definitely maintain healthy habits, a good balanced diet, be kind to your gut, things like regular exercise, mindfulness, yoga, eating good quality food, eating on time, avoiding processed food, avoiding very oily and spicy food. All these old-fashioned habits that our perhaps ancestors used to follow, it's still good advice, and your gut health is extremely important. So with that, I think I think we've said enough about gas. I think the take home is don't ignore it, don't be scared of it, and understand what you can do from your end to ensure good gut health.
So thank you, doctor, for sharing surgeon's perspective on gas.
Thank you, Dr. Ajit.
Medicine Made Simple. Powered by Glen Eagles Hospitals, where good people make you feel better.